20 years ago, Officer John Harris took a leap of faith that no one expected. He adopted 6 young black sisters who were on the verge of being separated forever. Against the odds, he raised them with unwavering love and determination. But their journey was far from easy, marked by prejudice, personal struggles, and even a life-threatening health crisis. Now, as the girls reflect on the man who gave them everything, their extraordinary act of gratitude will leave you stunned. Chapter 1. The Call. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows over Millbrook's streets, its golden rays glinting off parked cars and storefront windows. Officer John Harris adjusted the rearview mirror of his cruiser as he drove down Main Street, his routine patrol nearing its end. The town hummed with quiet activity, shopkeepers locking up for the evening, kids riding bikes down the sidewalk, and neighbors chatting on porches. Millbrook was the kind of place where everyone knew your name, where time moved just a little slower. For John, it was a steady anchor in a life that had felt adrift since Sarah's passing. Sarah. Just the thought of her name brought an ache to his chest. It had been 10 years since he lost her, but the memories remained vivid. Her laughter filling their home, her plans for the family they'd never had. Some days, he felt her absence more keenly than others. Today was one of those days. The crackle of the radio broke his reverie. 1456 Elm Street. Possible abandonment case involving minors. All available units. Respond. John's hand tightened on the wheel. Elm Street was on the edge of town, a neighborhood known for its sagging porches and peeling paint. A stark contrast to Millbrook's picturesque center. Calls from that area usually involved noise complaints or the occasional domestic dispute. But children? That was rare. He flicked on his siren, the wail cutting through the stillness, and turned onto Elm Street. The houses here seemed to lean inward, their facades tired from years of neglect. He spotted the address at the end of the cul-de-sac, its shutters hanging crookedly, and its front yard overgrown with weeds. A weathered swing dangled lopsidedly from a tree, swaying in the breeze. John parked and stepped out of his cruiser, his boots crunching on the gravel driveway. The house felt heavy, its silence oppressive. He knocked firmly on the front door. "Millbrook Police Department. Is anyone home?" No answer. He tried again, pressing his ear to the door. This time he caught it. A faint, muffled sound. Crying. His heart sank. He jiggled the doorknob. It was unlocked. Pushing the door open, he called out again. "Hello? Police, I'm coming in." The air inside hit him like a wall, stale, with a faint sourness that hinted at spoiled food or unwashed clothes. The living room was dim, the curtains drawn tight against the fading daylight. Toys lay scattered across the floor, plastic trucks missing wheels, a doll with matted hair, and the couch cushions were askew, as if someone had been sleeping there. In the corner, he saw them. 6 young girls, huddled together on a threadbare rug. The oldest looked no more than 12, her arms wrapped protectively around the younger ones. Their wide, frightened eyes locked onto John, their silence heavy with fear. "Hey," John said softly, lowering himself to their level. "It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to make sure you're all right." The oldest girl, her hair pulled back into neat braids, stepped forward, placing herself between John and the others. Her posture was rigid, her chin tilted defiantly, but her voice wavered. "Who are you?" "I'm Officer Harris," John said, keeping his tone calm. "What's your name?" "Amara," she replied. Her voice was sharp, but he could see the tremor in her hands. "What do you want?" "I just want to help," he said gently. His gaze shifted to the younger girls, 5 pairs of wide, tear-streaked faces peeking out from behind Amara. They clung to each other like their lives depended on it. "Are your parents here?" Amara hesitated, her lips pressing into a thin line. Finally, she shook her head. "They're gone. They're not coming back." John felt the words like a punch to the gut. "How long have you been here by yourselves?" Since the accident," Amara said. Her voice cracked, but she forced herself to stand tall. "We've been waiting for them to come home." John nodded slowly, his chest tightening. "You've done a good job looking after your sisters, Amara, but you don't have to do this alone anymore." He reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Officer Harris. I'm at 1456 Elm Street. 6 minors in need of immediate assistance, requesting social services and backup." As he spoke, the youngest girl, a curly-haired toddler clutching a battered stuffed animal, toddled toward him. She reached up, her tiny fingers grasping at his uniform. Without a word, she climbed into his lap, her tear-streaked face pressing into his chest. John froze, caught off guard by her trust. "It's okay," he murmured, his hand resting lightly on her back. "I've got you." The sound of approaching footsteps made him look up. Linda Jacobs, a social worker John had worked with before, stepped inside, her clipboard in hand. Her sharp eyes took in the scene, her expression softening. "What's the situation?" "Parents are deceased," John said, keeping his voice low. "These girls have been alone for days." Linda crouched down, her tone gentle. "Hi there," she said, addressing Amara. "I'm Linda. I'm here to help." Amara's jaw tightened. "You can't take us. We stay together." Linda exchanged a glance with John, her expression troubled. "That's not always possible," she admitted. "Finding a home for all 6 siblings is complicated." "No!" Amara's voice was fierce now, her small frame shaking with anger. "We're not splitting up." John looked at her, the steel in her gaze belying her age. Something stirred in him, a memory of Sarah, of their shared dreams of a home filled with children's laughter. He couldn't let these girls be separated. They'd lost enough. "What if I took them?" he heard himself say. Linda blinked. "John, adoption isn't something you just decide on the spot. These girls need stability, understanding, someone who can meet their needs." "I can give them that," John said firmly. "They need each other, and they need someone who's willing to fight for them." Amara's eyes locked onto his, searching for any hint of insincerity. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why would you do that?" John knelt to her level, meeting her gaze with quiet determination. "Because family isn't just about blood. It's about showing up when it matters most. And right now, you need someone to show up." Chapter 2. A Fragile Beginning. The house felt impossibly small. John sat on the edge of his worn couch, surveying the scene unfolding before him. Toys were scattered across the floor, clothes piled up on the back of chairs, and the faint smell of burnt toast lingered from his failed attempt at breakfast. 6 girls, each with their own energy and demands, had turned his once quiet home into a chaotic whirlwind. Amara had immediately claimed the role of leader. She moved about like a general commanding troops, delegating tasks to her sisters with precision. "Tiana, don't touch that," she snapped when the second oldest girl picked up a framed photograph of Sarah. "Put it back," where you found it." Tiana rolled her eyes but obeyed, carefully placing the frame on the mantel. "You're not the boss of me," she muttered under her breath. "I kind of am," Amara shot back. "Dad put me in charge." "Dad?" Tiana asked, her voice skeptical. She turned to John, who was busy folding a pile of blankets. "Is that what we're supposed to call you now?" John froze, caught off guard by the question. He looked at Tiana, then at the other girls, all of whom were watching him expectantly. "You can call me whatever feels right to you," he said finally. "I'm not here to replace your parents. I'm just here to help." "Help?" Amara echoed, her tone laced with doubt. "We'll see." The first week was a trial by fire. Amara took it upon herself to enforce the rules she thought were necessary for survival. She made sure the younger girls got up on time, helped them pack their bags for school, and even tried her best to make breakfast when John overslept. But her need for control quickly became a source of tension. "Amara, you're not my mom," Zoe said one morning, her voice trembling with frustration. "Stop telling me what to do." "I'm trying to keep us from falling apart," Amara snapped back. "Someone has to." John stepped in, his voice firm but gentle. "That's not just your job, Amara. It's mine, too. Let me help." Amara glared at him, her hands clenched into fists. "You don't get it. We've always had to take care of ourselves. And now you think you can just waltz in and fix everything?" "I'm not trying to fix everything," John replied, "but I am here to make sure you don't have to do it alone anymore." Her face softened, though her eyes still brimmed with mistrust. "We'll see," she said again, retreating to her room. The logistics of parenting 6 girls were overwhelming. John spent his evenings researching hair care tutorials, recipes for picky eaters, and tips on navigating the foster system. He reached out to Linda Jacobs for advice on everything from counseling services to school enrollment. "I've worked with a lot of foster families," Linda said during one of their calls, "but this is unique, John. You're not just taking in children. You're taking in their trauma. They're grieving, scared, and unsure if they can trust you. Give it time." Time, John quickly realized, wasn't something he could control. Each girl processed the upheaval in their own way. Jasmine, the youngest, clung to him constantly, her tiny hands seeking reassurance at every turn. Simone, the family's quiet artist, spent hours drawing in the margins of her notebooks, her sketches revealing more than she ever said aloud. And Tiana, ever the tomboy, threw herself into sports, as if running laps could chase away the pain. But it was Zoe who surprised John the most. The bookish middle child spent her evenings reading in the corner of the living room, her nose buried in fantasy novels. One night, as the others bickered over the TV remote, she walked over to John and handed him a book. "You should read this," she said simply. John looked at the cover. It was a story about a ragtag group of misfits who band together to save their kingdom. "What's it about?" he asked. "It's about finding family in unexpected places," Zoe said, her voice barely above a whisper. Then, before he could respond, she turned and walked away. Outside the house, Millbrook buzzed with curiosity and judgment. At the grocery store, John caught the whispers of 2 women in the produce aisle. "Did you hear about the Harris family?" one said, her voice dripping with skepticism. "He took in 6 black girls. Can you imagine?" "Must be a charity thing," the other replied. "No way he's cut out for that kind of responsibility." John kept his head high, but the words stung. He knew that some people in town doubted his motives. Others questioned his ability to navigate the cultural differences between him and the girls. but he also knew that his love for them wasn't conditional on approval from others. Mother Henrietta, the matriarch of Millbrook's Black Church, was one of John's staunchest supporters. "Don't let the gossip get to you, John," she said when he visited her one Sunday. "People will always find something to say. What matters is what you do." "And what if I mess up?" John asked, his voice heavy with doubt. "What if I'm not enough for them?" Henrietta placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're already enough because you're trying. Love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up." By the end of the first month, small moments of progress began to emerge. Amara, who had been fiercely independent from the start, finally let John help her with a math problem one night. "Thanks," she muttered afterward, her voice barely audible. Simone hung one of her drawings on the fridge without prompting, a colorful depiction of a tree with 6 roots intertwined. "It's us," she explained when John asked. "Different, but connected." Even Tiana, who often pushed back against authority, began joining John for early morning runs. "You're slow," she teased one day, her grin breaking through the usual toughness. And then there was Jasmine, who continued to shadow John everywhere he went. One evening, as he read her a bedtime story, she rested her head on his shoulder and whispered, "I like it here." For John, those words were worth every challenge. But not everything was smooth sailing. The girl's grief surfaced in unexpected ways, through outbursts, silent tears, or the occasional slammed door. And John's patience was tested daily, his resolve sometimes cracking under the weight of it all. One particularly rough night, as John sat alone in the living room after a shouting match with Amara, he found himself staring at Sarah's photograph. "I hope I'm doing this right," he murmured. "They deserve so much more than I know how to give." The house was quiet now, the girls all asleep. But in the stillness, John felt something he hadn't in years: hope. It was fragile, like the family he was trying to build, but it was there. And for John Harris, that was enough to keep going. Chapter 3: The Struggles of Parenthood. The second month felt like stepping onto a battlefield. For every small victory John experienced, there seemed to be a new challenge waiting to test his resolve. Parenting 6 daughters, each with their own personalities, traumas, and needs, was more demanding than anything he had faced on the force. One evening, John stood in the middle of the living room, staring at a mountain of mismatched socks and laundry. The noise of the house was constant. Amara shouting at Tiana about chores, Simone softly humming as she sketched on the coffee table, and Jasmine banging on a pot with a wooden spoon. John pressed a hand to his forehead, willing himself to keep calm. "Dinner's burning!" Zoe's voice called out from the kitchen. "Shoot!" John dashed to the stove, yanking the pan off the burner. The smell of charred spaghetti filled the room. He tossed the pan into the sink with a groan. "Dad," Tiana said from behind him, her tone skeptical, "you've burned dinner 3 nights in a row." "I'm trying, Tiana," John said, running a hand through his hair. "Cut me some slack, will you?" She folded her arms. "You could let Amara cook. She's better at it anyway." "Because I had to be," Amara snapped from across the room. "Not my job anymore." John sighed. It was clear that their roles within the family, ones forged out of necessity, were hard to shake. Amara was used to being the protector and provider, and letting go of that responsibility wasn't easy for her. "I'll figure it out," John said, his voice firm. "Just give me time." John quickly realized that he couldn't do it all alone. He sought out resources, enrolling himself in parenting workshops, and attending community events that focused on foster families. At one such meeting, he found himself seated in a circle with other foster parents, each sharing their experiences. "I've been fostering for 10 years, said a woman named Clara. "The key is consistency. Kids who've been through trauma need to know they can rely on you, even when they push you away." John nodded, scribbling notes in the notebook he had brought. "What about when they don't trust you at all? How do you break through that?" Clara smiled. "You don't break through. You wait. You show up every day until they realize you're not going anywhere." The advice stuck with John as he returned home that evening. The girls were still adjusting to their new lives, and he knew he needed to be patient. But patience, as he quickly learned, didn't always come naturally. One morning, John found Simone sitting on the front steps, her sketchbook open on her lap. The other girls were getting ready for school, but Simone had slipped outside unnoticed. She was drawing a tree, a tall oak with sprawling branches and deep roots. "That's beautiful," John said, sitting down beside her. Simone shrugged. "It's just a tree." "It's more than that," John said. "What does it mean to you?" Simone hesitated, her pencil hovering over the page. "It's like us, I guess. All different branches, but still connected." John smiled, feeling a swell of pride. "That's a pretty amazing way to look at it." She glanced at him, her expression guarded. "Do you really think we're going to stay like that? Connected?" John didn't hesitate. "Yes, it's not going to be easy, but I promise you, we're in this together." For the first time, Simone smiled. A small, fleeting smile, but a smile nonetheless. The girls faced their own struggles outside the home. At school, they were the subject of curious stares and whispered comments. Tiana, in particular, had a hard time blending in. "They think I'm a charity case," she said one evening, tossing her basketball bag onto the floor. "Some girl called me the Cops Project." John clenched his fists, anger bubbling in his chest. "That's not okay. Did you tell a teacher?" Tiana rolled her eyes. "What's the point? It's not like they're going to stop." "You can't let them treat you like that," John said. "You deserve respect." Tiana shrugged. "Doesn't matter. I'll just ignore them." But John could tell the words had gotten to her. He decided to attend her next basketball game, determined to show her that she wasn't alone. Sitting in the bleachers, he watched as Tiana dominated the court, her speed and skill unmatched. When the final buzzer sounded and her team won, John stood and clapped louder than anyone else in the gym. Tiana spotted him in the crowd, her expression softening. Later, as they walked to the car, she said, "Thanks for coming, Dad." "Wouldn't miss it for the world," he replied. The tension with Amara remained the most difficult to navigate. She was fiercely protective of her sisters, but hesitant to let John into their world. One night, as he passed by her room, he heard muffled sobs. Hesitating for a moment, he knocked gently. "Amara, can I come in?" "Go away," she said, her voice hoarse. Ignoring her protest, John opened the door. Amara sat on her bed, her face buried in her hands. The room was sparsely decorated, with only a few personal items: a photo of her parents on the nightstand, a stack of books by the bed. "I just want to help," John said, sitting on the edge of the bed. Amara looked up, her eyes red and puffy. "You can't help. You don't understand." "You're right," John admitted. "I don't understand everything you've been through. But I want to. And I'm here, no matter what. For a long moment, Amara didn't respond. Then, quietly, she said, "I miss them." John nodded, his own throat tightening. "I know you do, and I know I can't replace them. But I'm here for you and your sisters. Always." Amara didn't say anything else, but when John left the room, he felt the smallest glimmer of hope that things might get better. By the end of the 3rd month, the family had begun to settle into a rhythm. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but there were moments of connection that reminded John why he had made this choice. Jasmine's nightly bedtime hugs, Simone's growing confidence in her art, Tiana's jokes during their morning runs, all of it made the chaos worthwhile. But John knew the road ahead would be long. He wasn't just raising 6 daughters, he was helping them rebuild their lives. And for that, he needed every ounce of patience, love, and determination he could muster. As he sat on the couch that night, surrounded by the sounds of his new family, John whispered a quiet prayer. "Let me be enough for them." And as the girls slept soundly in their rooms, he allowed himself to believe that he could be. Chapter 4. A Community Divided. By the 4th month, the Harris household had settled into something resembling routine. Mornings were a cacophony of noise. The shrill beep of alarm clocks, Jasmine's high-pitched laughter as she tried to evade Amara's efforts to brush her hair, and Tiana's basketball dribbling echoing through the living room. Despite the chaos, there was a rhythm to their days, a fragile sense of normalcy. But outside the walls of their home, the world wasn't always as kind. "What's his angle?" The question, spoken in a hushed but unmistakable tone, hung in the air of the grocery store aisle. John was picking up cereal with Jasmine, who had insisted on pushing the cart. He glanced over his shoulder and saw 2 women whispering near the bread display, their eyes darting toward him. "They say he adopted them out of nowhere," one of them said, her voice carrying despite her attempt to be discreet. "6 black girls. Doesn't that seem odd?" "Maybe he's just trying to be a savior," the other replied, her expression skeptical. "But what does he know about raising them? It's not like he can teach them what they need to know." John felt a pang of frustration, but forced himself to focus on Jasmine, who was now carefully placing a box of cereal into the cart. "Good job, kiddo," he said, smiling down at her. She grinned back, blissfully unaware of the scrutiny they were under. But as they made their way to the checkout, John couldn't shake the weight of the women's words. He knew they weren't the only ones questioning his decision. Since taking in the girls, he had felt the eyes of Millbrook on him, some curious, others judgmental. While a few neighbors had welcomed the family with open arms, many seemed unsure of what to make of the arrangement. The church potluck. One of the few places John found solace was at the local church, where Mother Henrietta had become a steadfast supporter of his family. The elderly woman had a commanding presence, her silver hair always tucked neatly beneath a colorful headscarf. When she spoke, people listened. At the church's annual potluck, John arrived with all 6 girls in tow. The event was held in the fellowship hall, its long tables laden with casseroles, fried chicken, and an array of desserts. The room buzzed with chatter as families mingled and children played. Mother Henrietta greeted John at the door, her warm smile easing some of his nerves. "You brought the whole crew, I see," she said, looking fondly at the girls. "Wouldn't miss it," John replied. As the evening went on, John noticed the mix of reactions from the congregation. Some people approached him with kind words and offers of support. Others kept their distance, their polite smiles failing to hide their unease. "Mr. Harris," a woman named Diane said, cornering him near the dessert table. "I just wanted to say it's admirable what you're doing. But I have to wonder, have you thought about how you'll handle the cultural differences? Raising black girls in a white household is bound to have its challenges." John bristled at the implication, but kept his tone measured. "I think every family has its challenges," he said. "The important thing is that these girls know they're loved and supported." Diane nodded, though her expression remained doubtful. "Well, I hope you have someone to guide you. It's not something you can do alone." "I've got plenty of help," John said, his mind flashing to Mother Henrietta, Linda, and the growing network of mentors he had sought out. But the encounter left him feeling unsettled. Seeking guidance. That week, John decided to take Diane's advice in his own way. He reached out to Mother Henrietta and asked if she would introduce him to more leaders within the black community. "I want to make sure I'm doing right by the girls," he explained. Mother Henrietta smiled knowingly. "You've got a good heart, John, but it takes more than good intentions. Come by the church next Wednesday. I'll make sure you meet some folks who can help." The meeting was both enlightening and humbling. John found himself sitting in a circle with community leaders, each of whom had valuable insights to share. They talked about the importance of teaching the girls about their heritage, addressing the microaggressions they might face, and creating a space where they could embrace their identities. "It's not about being perfect," said Mr. Carter, a retired teacher who had spent decades mentoring youth in the area. "It's about being willing to learn and to listen." John left the meeting feeling both overwhelmed and inspired. He realized how much he still had to learn, but also felt reassured by the support he had gained. Navigating school challenges. The girls' challenges at school mirrored the tensions John faced in the community. Tiana, whose athletic talent was undeniable, had become a star on the basketball court. But her teammates' behavior often left her feeling isolated. "They never pass me the ball," she told John one evening, her frustration evident. "And when I do get it, they act like I'm showing off if I score." John frowned. "Have you talked to your coach about it?" Tiana shook her head. "What's the point? He doesn't care." The next day, John decided to attend one of Tiana's practices. Sitting in the bleachers, he watched as she outpaced and outmaneuvered her teammates, only to be ignored during key plays. Afterward, he approached the coach. "Coach Wilson," John said, his tone polite but firm. "I couldn't help but notice that Tiana isn't being given many opportunities on the court. She's one of your strongest players. Shouldn't she have more involvement in the game?" Coach Wilson shifted uncomfortably. "Well, you know how it is, Officer Harris. Team dynamics can be tricky." "Team dynamics shouldn't come at the expense of fairness," John replied. "Tiana deserves to be treated like any other player." The coach nodded reluctantly. "I'll see what I can do." While the change wasn't immediate, John's intervention made a difference. Over time, Tiana began to feel more included, and her confidence on the court soared. A small victory. Back at home, the girls continued to test the boundaries of their new lives. One night, as John tucked Jasmine into bed, she reached up and hugged him tightly. "I like it here," she whispered. Her words caught John off guard, filling him with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. "I'm glad, kiddo," he said, his voice soft. "I like it too." Down the hall, Amara sat at her desk, her head bent over a notebook. She had been distant all evening, but as John passed by her room, she called out, "Hey, Dad!" John paused, his heart skipping at the word. "Yeah?" "Thanks," she said without looking up. "For everything." John smiled. Anytime. As he made his way back to the living room, he allowed himself a moment of pride. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, he felt like they were on the right path. Chapter 5. Growing Pains. By the 5th month, the Harris household was more settled, but the transition was far from complete. The girls were navigating the complexities of their new lives, and as they grew more comfortable, new challenges surfaced, each one testing the fragile family bonds that John was trying to nurture. Amara's burden. Amara had always been the caretaker, the one who shielded her sisters from the harsh realities of their previous life. But now that John was in the picture, she struggled to relinquish control. She continued to hover, stepping in to solve problems before John could even offer a solution. One evening, after a particularly heated argument between Tiana and Simone over the television remote, Amara stormed into the kitchen where John was washing dishes. "You're supposed to be in charge," she said, her voice laced with frustration. "Why don't you do something?" John turned off the faucet and dried his hands, facing her calmly. "I thought you had it handled," he said. Amara blinked, caught off guard by his response. "That's not my job anymore." "You're right," John said gently. "It's not. But you've been doing it for so long that it's hard to stop, isn't it?" Amara crossed her arms, her expression softening just slightly. "I just want them to be okay." "They will be," John said, "but you don't have to do it alone anymore. Let me help." Amara didn't say anything, but later that night, John noticed that she let Tiana and Simone work out their argument on their own. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Simone's struggles. Simone had always been the quiet one, retreating into her art when the world felt overwhelming. But as she became more comfortable in her new home, her emotions began to surface in unexpected ways. One afternoon, John found her in the living room, furiously erasing a drawing in her sketchbook. The page was smeared with graphite, the outline of a family tree barely visible beneath the mess. "Hey, Simone," John said, sitting down beside her. "What's going on?" She looked at him, her eyes brimming with tears. "It's wrong," she said, gesturing to the sketch. "I don't know where we fit. I don't even know if we're a real family." John's heart ached at her words. He took the sketchbook from her and studied the drawing. "Families don't always fit neatly into a tree," he said. "Sometimes they're more like a garden, messy but full of life." Simone sniffled, her lips curving into a faint smile. "A garden?" "Yeah," John said, "with roots that grow deep and branches that stretch in all directions." For the first time, Simone didn't protest when John placed an arm around her shoulders. Instead, she rested her head against him, her pencil still clutched tightly in her hand. Tiana's drive. While the other girls grappled with their emotions, Tiana threw herself into basketball with single-minded determination. She spent hours practicing in the driveway, perfecting her layups and jump shots. But her intensity often bubbled over into frustration. One evening, after a particularly grueling practice, she stormed into the house and slammed her basketball onto the floor. "I'm done with this team," she declared. "What happened?" John asked, glancing up from the bills he was sorting. "They treat me like I don't belong," Tiana said, "like I'm only there because they need me to win." John set the papers aside and leaned forward. "Do you want to quit?" Tiana hesitated, her shoulders tense. "No," she admitted. "I just want them to respect me." "Then you've got to show them who you are," John said. "Not just on the court, but off it too. Let them see the leader I see. Tiana rolled her eyes, but didn't argue. The next day, she stayed after practice to help one of her younger teammates improve her free throws. Slowly, her efforts began to shift the dynamic, and by the end of the season, Tiana was named team captain. Zoe's silence. Zoe had always been the quiet observer of the family, her nose often buried in a book. But her silence was more than shyness. It was a shield she used to protect herself from being hurt. One rainy afternoon, John found her curled up in the corner of the living room, a blanket draped over her shoulders. She was reading a tattered copy of the Chronicles of Narnia, her expression unreadable. "Mind if I join you?" John asked, sitting on the floor beside her. Zoe shrugged, but didn't look up from her book. "What's your favorite part?" he asked. She hesitated, then pointed to a passage on the page. "When Aslan says, 'Courage, dear heart,' it's like he knows how scary it is to be brave." John nodded, letting her words sink in. "You know, I think you're pretty brave." Zoe glanced at him, her eyes wide with surprise. "Me?" "Yeah," John said. "You don't always have to say a lot to show courage. Sometimes just being here is enough." Zoe's lips curved into a small smile, and for the first time she leaned against John, letting him share her quiet world. A new tradition. Despite the challenges, there were moments of connection that reminded John of why he had taken this leap. One Saturday, he decided to try something new, a family game night. The dining table was cleared, a board game spread out in the center. Jasmine was the first to dive in, eagerly sorting the pieces while Amara read the rules aloud. Tiana and Simone bickered over who got to roll the dice first, while Zoe quietly observed, her interest piqued. As the night went on, the laughter grew louder, the arguments more playful than serious. Even Amara, who often kept her guard up, joined in the fun, her laughter ringing out like a melody. At one point, John looked around the table, taking in the sight of his daughters, each so different, yet bound together by something unspoken. For the first time in months, the house felt like home. A quiet conversation. Later that night, after the girls had gone to bed, John sat on the porch with a cup of coffee. The night was still, the stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. He thought about Sarah and how much she would have loved the chaos, the noise, the life that now filled their home. As if on cue, Amara stepped outside, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "Couldn't sleep?" John asked. Amara shook her head, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I was just thinking." "About what?" John prompted. "About Mom and Dad," she said softly. "They used to talk about taking us to Disney World one day. I don't think we ever really believed it would happen, but it was nice to dream." John nodded, his chest tightening. "Dreams are important," he said. "But so is building something real, something solid." Amara glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think we'll ever feel like a real family?" John smiled, his voice steady. "I think we already are." Chapter 6. Bonding Through Adversity. The turning point in the Harris family's journey came not in moments of ease, but in the crucible of adversity. It was the kind of challenge that would either tear them apart or bind them together in ways they hadn't thought possible. The incident. It started as a normal afternoon. Tiana was practicing basketball in the driveway, her sneakers squeaking against the concrete as she perfected her free throws. Simone was at the dining table sketching a cityscape in meticulous detail, while Jasmine built a tower of blocks on the living room floor. John was in the kitchen making sandwiches when the commotion started. A car screeched to a halt outside the house, and voices, loud and confrontational, carried through the open windows. "Hey, Harris!" someone yelled. "Why don't you mind your own business?" John froze. He recognized the voice. Todd Murphy, a local troublemaker with a grudge against law enforcement. John had arrested him years ago for vandalism, and the animosity had lingered ever since. John stepped outside to find Todd standing by his truck, his face red with anger. "Is there a problem, Todd?" John asked, keeping his tone calm. "Yeah, there's a problem," Todd spat. "You think you're some kind of hero? Taking in those girls? Like you're better than the rest of us?" John clenched his fists, but forced himself to stay composed. "Todd, go home. You're not welcome here." "You think you can just shut me up?" Todd sneered. "You're out of your depth, Harris. Those kids don't belong with you." Before John could respond, Tiana appeared at his side, her expression fierce. "Leave us alone!" she shouted. Todd's gaze shifted to her, and something dark flickered in his eyes. "You got a mouth on you, don't you?" he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Maybe you should learn to stay in your place." John stepped forward, his voice sharp. "Get out of here, Todd! Now!" Todd raised his hands in mock surrender. All right. Don't get your panties in a twist, but don't think this is over." He climbed into his truck and peeled away, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. The aftermath. Inside the house, the tension was palpable. Jasmine clung to John's leg, her eyes wide with fear. Tiana paced the living room, muttering under her breath, while Amara stood by the window, watching the road with a stony expression. "Who was that?" Simone asked, her voice trembling. "Just someone with too much time on his hands," John said, kneeling to Jasmine's level. "You're safe. I won't let anything happen to you." But the words rang hollow. The incident had shaken them all, a stark reminder of the prejudice and hostility that still lingered in their community. Later that night, as John tucked Jasmine into bed, she whispered, "Why did he say we don't belong?" John's throat tightened. "Some people don't understand what it means to love someone who's different from them," he said carefully. "But that doesn't make them right. You belong here, Jasmine. Always." Jasmine nodded, her small hand clutching his tightly. "Promise?" "I promise," John said, his voice firm. And he meant it. The community rallies. Word of the incident spread quickly, and the community's response was swift and divided. Some people offered support, bringing meals or stopping by to check on the family. Others remained silent, their indifference a quieter form of judgment. Mother Henrietta, as always, was a pillar of strength. She organized a meeting at the church, inviting community leaders to discuss ways to support the Harris family and address the underlying tensions in Millbrook. "We can't pretend this kind of thing doesn't happen," she said during the meeting, her voice resonating with conviction. "If we want to call ourselves a community, we need to act like one." The meeting resulted in several initiatives, including a mentorship program for foster families and a neighborhood watch group to ensure the safety of all residents. For John, it was a reminder that while prejudice still existed, so did solidarity. The girls come together. The incident had a profound effect on the girls, particularly Tiana. Her anger, once directed at the basketball court, now found a new focus. She began researching civil rights movements and attending youth advocacy meetings, channeling her frustration into action. "I want to make a difference," she told John one evening. I don't want people like Todd to win." "You already are," John said, pride evident in his voice. "Every time you stand up for yourself, you're making a difference." Amara, too, took on a more active role in the family. She started tutoring her sisters, helping Zoe with her writing assignments and Simone with her art projects. "We're stronger together," she told them one night. "No one can take that away from us." Even Jasmine, who had been the most shaken by the incident, found her own way to cope. She began drawing pictures of the family, filling the fridge with crayon depictions of their home, their smiles, their love. A lesson in resilience. One quiet evening, as the girls sat together in the living room, Simone sketching, Tiana reading, Jasmine playing with her blocks, John watched them from the kitchen doorway. The room was filled with an easy warmth, the kind of peace that felt hard-earned. Amara glanced up and caught his eye. "What are you staring at?" she asked, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Just you girls," John said. "You're amazing, you know that?" Amara rolled her eyes, but her smile widened. "We already knew that, Dad." It was the first time she had called him Dad without hesitation, and the word filled John with a quiet joy. For all the challenges they had faced, moments like this reminded him why he had made the choice to bring them into his life. "Yeah, well," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "I'm proud of you, all of you." "Good," Tiana said without looking up from her book. "Because we're keeping you." John laughed, the sound light and unburdened. "Deal." Chapter 7. A Father's Battle. Life in the Harris household had begun to stabilize. The girls were thriving in their own ways, and John had grown more confident in his role as their father. The house still hummed with chaos, but it was a chaos filled with laughter, learning, and the occasional argument that ended in reluctant apologies. But just as John thought the hardest days were behind them, life threw him an unexpected challenge, one that would test the strength of the family he had worked so hard to build. The first signs. It started with a persistent cough. At first, John chalked it up to the cold weather and the long hours he had spent outside fixing the broken fence in the backyard. He waved off Amara's concern when she pointed out how tired he looked. "Just need some rest," he said, brushing it aside. But the cough worsened. By the second week, it was accompanied by shortness of breath and a dull ache in his chest. John found himself struggling to keep up with the girls' energy. The early morning runs with Tiana became less frequent, and he often needed to sit down after climbing the stairs. "You okay, Dad?" Jasmine asked one night as they sat together watching her favorite cartoon. "I'm fine, kiddo," John replied, forcing a smile. "Just a little tired." But he wasn't fine, and deep down, he knew it. The diagnosis. It wasn't until Amara insisted on driving him to the clinic that John finally sought medical help. "You're not invincible, you know," she said, her tone firm but tinged with worry. "You can't take care of us if you're not taking care of yourself." John reluctantly agreed, though he assured her it was nothing serious. But as he sat in the doctor's office, waiting for the results of his tests, a sense of unease settled over him. When the doctor finally entered the room, her expression was grave. "John, we've found something concerning," she began. "It appears you have stage 3 lung cancer." The words hit John like a punch to the gut. He sat in stunned silence, the doctor's voice fading into the background as she explained treatment options and next steps. All he could think about was the girls. How would they manage without him? Telling the girls. John agonized over how to tell the girls. He knew they had already endured so much loss, and the thought of adding to their pain was unbearable. But he also knew they deserved the truth. One evening, he gathered them in the living room. The atmosphere was unusually quiet, the girls sensing that something important was about to be said. "I need to talk to you all about something," John began, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. "I went to the doctor recently, and they found something serious. I've been diagnosed with lung cancer." The room erupted with questions and protests. "What does that mean?" Tiana demanded, her voice rising in panic. "Are you going to be okay?" "Can they fix it?" Simone asked, her eyes wide with fear. Jasmine clung to his arm, tears streaming down her face. "You can't leave us, Dad." John held up his hands, trying to calm them. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere without a fight. The doctors have a treatment plan, and I'm going to do everything I can to get better. But I need you all to be strong, okay? We're in this together." Amara, who had been silent up until that point, looked at him with tear-filled eyes. "We're not losing you," she said, her voice trembling with determination. "We'll do whatever it takes." The treatment begins. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest the family had faced. John started chemotherapy, which left him weak and nauseous. The once strong figure the girls had leaned on now struggled to make it through the day without resting. But the girls rallied around him, each finding ways to help. Amara took charge of managing his appointments, coordinating with the doctors and keeping track of his medications. "You're not missing a single dose," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Simone turned her artistic talents toward brightening John's world. She covered the walls of his bedroom with her drawings, pictures of their family, scenes from nature, and abstract designs filled with vibrant colors. "It's so you can see something beautiful when you wake up," she explained. Tiana became John's personal trainer, encouraging him to stay active on days when he felt strong enough. "Just one lap around the yard," she'd say, her voice equal parts firm and gentle. "You've got this, Dad." Even Jasmine, the youngest, found ways to help. She sat by his side during treatments, holding his hand and reading him stories in her sweet, sing-song voice. "You're my hero," she told him one day, her eyes shining with love. A test of strength. Despite their efforts, there were days when the weight of it all felt unbearable. John hated seeing the fear in his daughter's eyes, hated feeling like a burden to the family he had fought so hard to create. One night, as he lay awake in bed, Amara knocked softly on his door. "Can I come in?" "Of course," John said, sitting up as she entered. Amara sat on the edge of the bed, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, "about what you said, about being strong. But I don't feel strong, Dad. I feel scared." John reached for her hand, his grip steady despite the weakness in his body. "Being strong doesn't mean you're not scared," he said. "It means you keep going, even when you are." Amara nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. "We can't lose you," she whispered. "You won't," John said, his voice filled with conviction. "No matter what happens, we'll always have each other. That's what family is." A glimmer of hope. After months of grueling treatments, the family received the news they had been praying for. The cancer was in remission. The girls cried tears of relief, as the doctor explained that while the journey wasn't over, John had a strong chance of recovery. That night, they celebrated with a simple dinner at home, pizza and ice cream, the girls' favorite. As they sat around the table laughing and sharing stories, John looked at his daughters and felt a deep sense of gratitude. "You saved me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Every single one of you. I wouldn't have made it through this without you." Amara raised her glass of soda, a rare smile lighting up her face. "To family," she said. "To family," the others echoed, their voices blending in a chorus of love and resilience. Chapter 8. Leaving the Nest. By the 8th month, life in the Harris household had found its rhythm again. John was still regaining his strength after months of treatment, but the cancer's remission was a victory they all celebrated daily. The girls, now more confident in themselves and their place in the family, were beginning to dream bigger. Yet, with those dreams came the bittersweet reality of change. The Harris family was starting to grow up. Tiana's big decision. Tiana was the first to announce her plans to leave. She had earned a full basketball scholarship to a prestigious university 3 hours away. It was a dream come true, but the decision weighed heavily on her. She approached John one evening as he sat on the porch, a mug of tea warming his hands. "Dad," she began, sitting down beside him, "I've been thinking a lot about college." John nodded, his expression calm. "It's a big decision." "I know," Tiana said, fiddling with the edge of her sweatshirt. "And I want to go. But I don't want to leave you." John smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "Tiana, you've worked so hard for this. Don't let anything hold you back, not even me. I'll be fine." "But what if you're not?" she asked, her voice small. "What if something happens, and I'm not here?" John placed a hand on her shoulder. "Nothing's going to happen. And even if it does, I'll always be proud of you for chasing your dreams. That's what I want for all of you. To go out into the world and live the lives you deserve." Tiana nodded, her resolve strengthening. "Okay, I'll do it." And she did. The day she packed up her things and left for college, the family gathered in the driveway to see her off. Jasmine clung to her leg, tears streaming down her face. "Don't go," she wailed. "I'll be back," Tiana promised, crouching to hug her youngest sister. "And I'll call all the time, I swear." As Tiana's car disappeared down the street, the house felt a little emptier, but John knew this was just the beginning. Amara's leadership. With Tiana gone, Amara stepped into an even more prominent leadership role within the family. Now a senior in high school, she had become a force to be reckoned with, running student council meetings, volunteering at the community center, and tutoring her younger sisters. But even as she thrived, Amara struggled with the idea of leaving. One night, John found her in the kitchen, staring at a stack of college brochures. "Thinking about your future?" he asked, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Yeah," Amara said, her tone hesitant. "But I don't know if I can go. What if I leave and everything falls apart here?" John sat down beside her, his gaze steady. "Amara, you've been holding this family together for a long time, even before you came here. But it's okay to let go. You've earned the right to focus on yourself." Amara shook her head. "It just feels selfish." "It's not selfish," John said firmly. "It's brave, and I'll still be here. Your sisters will still be here. Nothing's going to fall apart." Amara studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Okay, I'll think about it." When acceptance letters started arriving in the spring, Amara finally made her choice. She would be attending a university 2 states away, studying social work, a decision inspired by her own experiences in foster care. Simone's breakthrough. Simone's art had continued to evolve, and by the end of the school year, her talent had earned her a spot in a prestigious summer program at an art institute in the city. It was an opportunity she had dreamed of, but when the acceptance letter arrived, she hesitated. "What if I'm not good enough?" she asked John, holding the letter like it might catch fire in her hands. "Simone, you're incredible," John said without hesitation. "This is your chance to show the world what you can do." Simone's cheeks flushed with uncertainty. "But what if they don't like my work?" "Then you keep creating until they do," John said. "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to try." With John's encouragement, Simone took the leap. Her summer at the Institute was a transformative experience, and when she returned, she was more determined than ever to pursue a career as an artist. Zoe finds her voice. Zoe, the quiet observer, had always preferred the background, but as her sisters began forging their own paths, she started to wonder where she fit in. One day, John found her sitting under the oak tree in the backyard, a notebook balanced on her knees. "What are you working on?" he asked, sitting down beside her. "Just writing," Zoe said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can I see?" John asked. Zoe hesitated before handing him the notebook. Inside were pages filled with vivid descriptions, compelling characters, and heartfelt dialogue. John read in silence, marveling at her talent. "Zoe, this is amazing," he said finally. "You've got a gift." Zoe shrugged, her cheeks turning pink. "It's just something I do for fun." "It's more than that," John said. "You should share this with people." Zoe's eyes lit up, and for the first time, John saw a spark of confidence in her. She started submitting her stories to competitions, and when one of her pieces was published in a local magazine, the whole family celebrated. Jasmine's adjustment. Jasmine, the youngest, had the hardest time adjusting to the changes. With her older sisters leaving one by one, she clung to John more than ever. "I miss them," she said one night, as John tucked her into bed. "Why does everyone have to leave?" "Because they're growing up," John said gently. "But that doesn't mean they're gone forever. They'll always be your sisters, no matter where they are." Jasmine nodded, though tears glistened in her eyes. "Promise?" "I promise," John said, kissing her forehead. "And you know what? One day, you're going to do amazing things too." Jasmine's smile returned, and though the house felt quieter with each departure, her laughter still filled it with warmth. A quiet moment. One evening, as the sun set over Millbrook, John sat on the porch with Amara. The two of them watched the sky turn shades of pink and orange, the cicadas humming in the background. "You've built something amazing here," Amara said, her voice soft. "We've built it together," John replied. Amara smiled. "I'm going to miss this place." "You'll always have a home here," John said, "no matter where you go." As the stars began to appear, John felt a deep sense of pride. His daughters were growing into strong, capable women, ready to take on the world. And though the thought of an emptier house tugged at his heart, he knew this was exactly what he had hoped for. A family that would endure, no matter the distance. Chapter 9. Legacy in Action. As the years passed, the Harris family evolved into something greater than John could have ever imagined. His daughters, once scared and uncertain about their place in the world, were now blossoming into independent, resilient women. Though their journeys took them in different directions, they remained deeply connected to the home and values they had built together. Amara, Simone, Tiana, Zoe, Layla, and Jasmine had not only grown as individuals, but had begun to envision ways to give back to others, ensuring the lessons they had learned under John's care would ripple far beyond their family. The spark of an idea. It was Amara who first proposed the idea of creating something lasting, a foundation that could support children in foster care and advocate for keeping siblings together. She brought it up during a family dinner, her tone casual but her words charged with purpose. "I've been thinking," she said, setting down her fork, "what if we started a foundation in Dad's honor? Something to help other kids like us." The room fell silent, everyone processing her suggestion. John, seated at the head of the table, looked up from his plate, his brow furrowed. "In my honor?" "Yeah," Amara said, her voice gaining strength. "You didn't just give us a home, Dad. You showed us what it means to fight for family. We should share that with the world." Tiana grinned. "I love it. We could focus on programs that keep siblings together. No one should have to grow up without their brothers or sisters." Simone nodded, already envisioning the creative possibilities. "And we could host art workshops or mentorship programs, something to help kids express themselves." Even Zoe, who rarely spoke up during these discussions, chimed in. "We could publish a book of stories from foster kids. Let people know what it's really like." Jasmine's eyes lit up. "And throw big parties for them, with cake and music and presents." John was overwhelmed. He had always encouraged his daughters to think big, but the idea of them building something so meaningful left him momentarily speechless. Finally, he smiled. "If anyone can make this happen, it's you girls." Building the foundation. The planning began in earnest, with each sister contributing her unique skills and perspective. Amara took charge of organizing meetings and filing paperwork, her social work background proving invaluable. Tiana used her connections from college and basketball to secure funding and sponsorships, while Simone designed the foundation's logo and promotional materials. Zoe, ever the storyteller, began gathering testimonials from foster families and children, weaving their stories into a compelling narrative that would form the heart of their mission. "People need to see the humanity behind the statistics," she explained during one brainstorming session. "It's not just about numbers, it's about lives." Jasmine, still in high school but eager to help, threw herself into organizing fundraisers. She convinced her classmates to hold bake sales and car washes, raising money for the foundation's launch event. John watched all of this unfold with a mixture of awe and pride. Though he had always believed in his daughter's potential, seeing them work together to create something so impactful was beyond anything he had imagined. The launch event. The day of the Foundation's official launch was nothing short of magical. The event was held at the local community center, which had been transformed into a vibrant space filled with balloons, artwork, and photographs that celebrated family and resilience. Simone's drawings were displayed along one wall, each piece depicting scenes of love and connection, siblings playing together, families embracing, and children finding joy despite adversity. Zoe's stories were printed on posters, their words raw and powerful, drawing tears from those who stopped to read them. Tiana took the stage to give the opening speech, her confidence shining as she addressed the crowd. "We're here today because one person believed in us," she began. "Our dad didn't just give us a home, he gave us hope. And now, we want to give that hope to others." The applause was thunderous, but the most emotional moment came when Amara took the microphone. Her voice wavered slightly as she looked out at the audience, her gaze lingering on John. "This foundation isn't just about us," she said. "It's about the thousands of kids who need to know they're not alone. It's about making sure that no child has to grow up without their siblings or without love. And it's about honoring the man who taught us what family really means." John wiped away tears as the crowd gave Amara a standing ovation. For all the challenges he had faced as a parent, this moment made it all worthwhile. A growing impact. The John Harris Foundation quickly gained traction, its programs making a tangible difference in the lives of foster children and families. The mentorship initiatives paired older siblings with younger ones, ensuring they could stay connected even when separated by the foster system. Art workshops led by Simone provided a creative outlet for kids to process their emotions, while Tiana's sports camps encouraged teamwork and self-confidence. Zoe's book project became a bestseller, with proceeds funding scholarships for foster youth. Jasmine, though still young, emerged as a charismatic ambassador for the foundation, speaking at schools and community events about the importance of family. John often found himself fielding questions about how he had managed to raise 6 remarkable daughters. His answer was always the same: "I didn't do it alone. They taught me as much as I taught them." A special tribute. On the Foundation's 1-year anniversary, the daughters surprised John with a special tribute. They unveiled a plaque in his honor, inscribed with words that left him speechless. "To John Harris, the man who taught us that family is chosen, love is unbreakable, and every child deserves a home. Your legacy lives on in every life we touch." John stood before the plaque, his heart full. "I don't deserve this," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, you do," Amara said, wrapping an arm around him. "You deserve all of it." As the evening wound down, the family gathered on the porch of their home, the cool night air filled with the sound of crickets. The sky was clear, the stars shining brightly above them. "You girls have done something incredible," John said, his voice filled with pride. "I always knew you'd change the world." Amara leaned against him, her expression soft. "You showed us how, Dad." John looked at his daughters, each of them so different, yet bound by a shared love and purpose. In that moment, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace. Whatever the future held, he knew they would face it together. Chapter 10. Full Circle. The Harris household had changed over the years, evolving as each daughter pursued her dreams. The once bustling home had grown quieter, but its walls still echoed with the laughter and memories of the family who had built their lives there. For John, it was a bittersweet transition. He was proud of his daughters, but their absence left a void he often filled by reminiscing about their journey together. A homecoming. One spring afternoon, John was sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, the warmth of the sun on his face. The garden was in full bloom, its vibrant flowers a testament to Jasmine's green thumb. The quiet was interrupted by the sound of car doors slamming and familiar voices calling out. "Dad!" Jasmine's voice rang out, her excitement unmistakable. John stood just as Jasmine barreled toward him, throwing her arms around his waist. "Hey, kiddo," he said, laughing. "What's all this about?" As he looked up, he saw the rest of his daughters stepping out of cars, their smiles as bright as the day. Amara led the way, carrying a covered dish, while Tiana balanced a basketball under one arm. Simone, Zoe, and even Layla. All of them were home, together, for the first time in months. "We thought you could use some company," Amara said, her tone teasing. "You've been too quiet lately," Simone added, placing a bag of art supplies on the porch. John shook his head, his chest tight with emotion. "You girls are going to spoil me." "That's the plan," Tiana said, tossing the basketball into the yard. The afternoon was spent sharing stories, laughter, and a meal prepared by the daughters. They reminisced about their childhood, about the early chaotic days when they were just learning to be a family. "Remember when Dad tried to braid Jasmine's hair?" Tiana said, laughing. "It was like watching someone tie knots with oven mitts on," Amara added, her grin wide. "Hey!" John said, raising his hands in mock defense. "I've gotten better." The girls erupted into laughter, and for a moment it felt as if no time had passed. They were a family, as strong and connected as ever. A letter to the future. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Amara approached John with a small box in her hands. "We've been working on something," she said, her voice soft. Inside the box was a collection of letters, each one written by one of the girls. "We wanted to share how much you've meant to us," Amara explained. "You'll read them, right?" John's hands trembled slightly as he held the box. "Of course," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Later, when the house was quiet, John sat at the dining table and opened the first letter. It was from Amara. "Dear Dad, you've always told us that family is a choice, but I think you underestimate the choice you made. You didn't just give us a home. You gave us a future. I hope you know how much you mean to us, and how much you've changed our lives. With love, Amara." One by one, he read the letters, each one filled with heartfelt gratitude and love. By the time he finished, tears streaked his face. He felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that his daughters understood how much he loved them. A legacy remembered. As the years passed, the Harris family continued to thrive. The John Harris Foundation grew in size and impact, helping hundreds of foster children find homes and connections that might have otherwise been lost. Amara became a leading advocate for foster care reform, her work changing lives across the country. Tiana used her platform as a professional athlete to mentor young girls, while Simone's art gained national recognition, inspiring others to find beauty in their struggles. Zoe published her first novel, a fictionalized account of their family's journey, that became a bestseller. Jasmine, the youngest, became an environmental scientist, her love for nurturing life blossoming into a career that made her father proud. John, now retired, found joy in watching his daughter's successes from afar. His home became a sanctuary, filled with photos, mementos, and the occasional visit from his grandchildren. Though life had moved forward, the foundation of love they had built remained unshaken. A final gathering. On a warm summer evening, the entire Harris family gathered at John's house to celebrate his birthday. The backyard was alive with activity, grandchildren chasing fireflies, the smell of barbecue wafting through the air, and the sound of music and laughter blending harmoniously. Amara raised a toast, her voice carrying over the crowd. "To Dad," she said, holding up her glass. "The man who showed us that family isn't about where you come from. It's about where you're going. We wouldn't be here without you." The crowd erupted in cheers, but John was too choked up to respond. He simply raised his glass, his heart full of gratitude. As the night wore on, John sat quietly under the stars, watching his daughters and their families. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every struggle, every sacrifice. He thought of Sarah and the life they had dreamed of together. In many ways, it had turned out even better than he could have imagined. For John Harris, The legacy of love he had built wasn't just about the family he had created. It was about the future they would continue to build together. John Harris's extraordinary act of love and the journey he shared with his 6 adopted daughters is a testament to the power of family, courage, and compassion. Their story didn't just change their lives, it inspired an entire community and beyond. If this story of resilience and gratitude touched your heart, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more uplifting tales like this. And before you go, we want to hear from you. What do you think inspired John to take that leap of faith? How would you have handled the challenges he faced? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.